Hi Moreno, Heaven again. Nice to see you. I'm just going to be talking about my final reflections for Psychodrama. Um, it's not what I expected. Wow is my initial reaction to it. Well, yes, well, nice to see you again, Heaven. Well, please tell me why wow? What was your actual um, first impressions, or what did you think Psychodrama could be for you? Um, I thought Psychodrama was going to be super scary. I thought it was something super exclusive, like something really like reserved for the heavy stuff in life. And not that I have heavy, like I don't have heavy things to unpack in my life. But I'll be honest, I mean, I'm a very sensitive person, I'm a very private person. I've been told I'm a little bit mysterious. I'm kind but mysterious, and you know, I don't really put myself out in the open there. So I thought Psychodrama would just kind of do that, for me. And I didn't really, that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to be a protagonist this semester, actually. I think it's a powerful role, but I don't think that I'm ready for it. Um, well, yes, you're right. Being a protagonist is a very powerful role. You get to shape your own life and create a different world in which we don't live in. It's your world, it's your story. Um, and there's nothing that you can't do in a psychodrama. But why is it that you feel that you couldn't be a protagonist? You get to shape your own life and explore yourself. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Like I said, it was kind of scary. The first ever psychodrama I participated in myself, I was an auxiliary ego, and I played somebody's sadness, and that was heavy. But it also made it very clear to me that psychodrama is so powerful and impactful. I just don't think I was ready to explore that for myself just yet and just be so out in the open. That alone scares me. Um, well, yes. Yes. In a psychodrama, you are out in the open. But that's the power of being a protagonist in your own psychodrama, and you have others, you know, that are there to support you. It's all in support of you. No one's no one should be critiquing you or should be looking at you in any weird way. It should just be about, there should be a lot of emphasis on the sharing aspect and engaging, so that we build the connections with each other, that we build whatever connections, whatever you brought up in your psychodrama, say you did one, what can other people take from it, what can they relate to with it. And that's how we heal our community. That's how you heal yourself as a protagonist in your own psychodrama, and that's how you take it out with you further, and you heal communities, and that's why I created psychodramas, to make sure that everyone can experience the power of being their own protagonist, but sharing with the world and making things better, building that empathy and fostering healthy relationships, understanding relationships more so that we can heal each other. So I encourage you to be a protagonist at some point in your career. Yes, sure. Yeah, I will take that into consideration. It definitely has intrigued me. And yeah, it is healthy. It has all been healthy. I have a really great professor who is really
knows what she's doing, so there was no reason for me to be scared. But what I will say is that it hasn't really encouraged me to like. It has. I'm a little more curious about role theory now. You know, the role creating, role taking, role playing is so cool to me. So I don't know. We'll see my future. What it look like with psychodrama. But yeah, thank you for creating psychodrama. It's cool, and I hope that I can use it in the future, and I can be a really great director in the future. So thank you.
Having more. Welcome, JL Moreno. Thank you so much for being here. I'm studying drama therapy, and I took a psychodrama course this semester, and so I'm just going to be talking to you, asking you questions a little bit about this drama that I had to deconstruct. So, Heaven, so lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to hear that you're studying drama therapy and you're interested in psychodrama. It's really important. So yes, please tell me what happened. Yes. Okay. I feel like I don't have a lot of time with you. There's a lot of things that I want to talk about. I'll first go through like the rundown of just like everything. Hopefully I can like say that quickly. So the intervention was basically about practicing gratitude with someone that you haven't been able to express that gratitude to before. So the group was about like 6 people. The director explained that and said that the warm-up was going to be where you thought of someone in your life who you're so grateful to, but you haven't been able to express that gratitude. And you need to breathe, close your eyes, meditate on that person, and become that person. So that was role reversal right there. That was the warm-up. And it was very good. And then they were able to introduce themselves as those roles to other pairs in the groups. And then they were able to come back to the circle, introduce themselves, I think, to the entire group, and then they de-rolled. And then from there, they went to an action sociogram where a protagonist was chosen, Linda. And Linda had a contract with the Walk and Talk, obviously to express gratitude to her friend, Jean, but specifically to her friend, Jean, when she was sick, and what is holding you back from expressing gratitude. So she wanted to explore that. So in the Walk and Talk, the therapist, the director was, saying, tell me about Jean, trying to get a better understanding of their relationship between Linda and Jean. And from there, auxiliary ego came in, and Linda casted someone to be Jean for her. And when she did that, she did role training. I have a question about that later on. But she did the role training. She gave a nice monologue as the role of Jean, and they included scarves, and the scarves represented different qualities about Jean. And then they went into dialogue. They went into a lot of doubling. The doubling was not just from the director, but also from other group members, which is another question I have. Then there was another walk and talk that had happened where they were getting ready to scene set. And I have another question about that. They were getting ready to scene set, and they decided that they finally weren't going to do it in the park, the conversation, but they were going to do it in the living room. And so basically the rest of it was just, the dialogue back and forth, the doubling, the role reversal, getting deeper into, what was happening with Jean, with Linda. Yes, and then they shared at the end, and there was I felt like a nice cathartic release of, other people thinking of others in their lives where they've been sick, or they haven't been able to talk to them, or they were having for a long time, or they were having the same feelings Jean was. And I felt that for myself as well, and I felt, that was really powerful, which is why I'm so interested in like psychodramas. So yeah, that's what happened. I said that I had some questions, so let me get into those questions. I don't know how much time I have. Oh, okay. So yeah, my first question
is the role training and the doubling.
I was so distracted, and I felt like it was a little bit harmful for the group members to do that. And what I mean by that is, for example, with the doubling, they're not like a trained psychodramatist, so I was kind of like, well, why are they like doubling? I wasn't sure how I felt a little weird about that. And then with the role reversal and role training, when Linda was Jean and gave the monologue, the director didn't tell the auxiliary ego to like repeat some of that back, to make sure that they really got the essence. And so I was a little bit confused about that. And then later on, there was at one point where the auxiliary ego, Jean, was saying something back. Like there was that dialogue where, I'm so used to being an auxiliary ego in my class and just letting the director tell me when to go, so I'm not speaking speaking out of the character and not in service of the protagonist. So yeah, I just wanted to know what you thought about that. That was a lot. Thank you for sharing with me. Well, first I would like to say that it sounds as if the psychodrama it was going the way that I intended it for it to go. It sounds like the warm-up is so crucial. The warm-up is really important and cannot be skipped. So I heard that happened. And then there was role reversal, there was role training, there was doubling and use of scarves, and that's really great. And auxiliary egos and witnesses were able to share and talk about their lives and connect with Linda. So it sounds like everything sounds really good. Can you further explain a little bit more about why you're having a little bit of trouble with that?
Yes, absolutely. To be more specific, I felt like it was a little bit unsafe. I felt like the director should have jumped in and said, "Can we hear that back?" Or just left the doubling just to the director. So yeah, what do you think about that? You said it felt it was unsafe. Unsafe. That's good to think about how certain techniques that are being used in service of the protagonist may be the right thing to do, but it can be done in the wrong way. So it's good that you're thinking about how things can get really harmful, because there is a fine line when it comes to psychodrama. But the thing with psychodrama is that the surface reality, like there's no limitations. You're working with a fantasy. You're working in a safe space. It should be a safe space where the protagonist can explore new possibilities and perspectives and behaviors and get deeper about the emotional, like what's happening with them. And so I understand what you're saying. To be a psychodramatist, it takes years of experience, and you really need to like attune and check in with your client. But that doesn't mean, were there any moments where you felt like that didn't happen? No, now that you say that, there was a moment where the protagonist was shaking her leg, and the director was like, "Okay, what's going on with your leg?" And I feel like that was a really great example of how you can check in with your client. Well, yes, that's really important. Body cues are really important, and it helps the director to check in with the client, and to control what's going on. There's no limitations in a psychodrama, but control is so important. Control is so crucial, because that's when it does become harmful. Controlled exploration is how health can be demonstrated in a psychodrama. And that is in service of the protagonist. So if you're having other auxiliary egos
saying lines that maybe weren't given to them. But if it's helping the protagonist go deeper and to figure out more things about themselves, then that's spontaneous and that's creative, and that's what psychodrama is for. Like, that's what I created it for. And a good director, a good therapist is going to know when to recast, or is going to know when to say, hey, let's role train again, let's make sure we got the part correctly, so it's in service of the protagonist. And sticking to the contract. If whatever the auxiliary ego is saying, whatever the doubling statements are, giving that clarity for the protagonist, if it's all, the flow is right, then sounds good to me. But you're thinking along the right lines. You're thinking about the safety of psychodrama, which is really good. But if it's in service of the client, then it sounds fine to me. How much time do I have? But yes, thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. You said something. I'm trying to think what you said. But just thinking, I'll think about it. I'm sure it's gonna come to my mind. I want to talk a little about. I feel like you mentioned it. Wow, I forgot. You said a lot of stuff there. Thank you for that. It makes a lot of sense. I think the role reversal helped to really concretize what was going on for Linda. Yes, that's what I was thinking. There were moments where I felt like, so at first I thought that the psychodrama was interpersonal, but it felt a little bit intrapsychic because so many things are being concretized, but not necessarily about their relationship. Like, yes, but a lot of things were going on for Linda, which is why I was so curious about the leg shaking. That felt intrapsychic to me. So I was wondering, with all of these elements happening, doubling and role reversal, like, how, what do you think about was it intrapsychic? Was it interpersonal? Yeah, what do you think? I definitely understand what you're saying. I think they're all interconnected. I think, concretizing is the source of a psychodrama. That's where everything stems from. And the role reversal helps with that as well, and the other techniques, but definitely the role reversal, because it makes things tangible. And so when you're concretizing as a therapist, helping the protagonist to concretize certain things about themselves, it does become intrapsychic, but these intrapsychic qualities can further help the protagonist realize that maybe it's affecting the interpersonal relationships that they may be having with people in their lives, with Linda and Jean. And then to further make it even more, like, there's so many more systems at play, larger systems in our lives, social systems, with your job, with your government, with your country. How are these intrapsychic layers affecting the interpersonal connections you have, and how that largely affects everything else that's going on around you, and how can you explore that safely, controlled but limitless, in a psychodrama. Concretizing really, really helps with that, and it promotes that spontaneity and creativity, and so it's all interconnected. But I understand what you're saying. It's practicing gratitude, and you're practicing gratitude with another person, but that doesn't mean that, maybe you're having trouble with practicing gratitude because you can't practice gratitude within yourself. So it's interpersonal, but it's also intrapsychic at the same time. Don't get too confused with that. They're all interconnected, and that's what makes it so powerful and impactful. And yes, that is so great that you are having these questions about a psychodrama. They all live and exist on that stage in the here and now for the protagonist.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. I wrote a lot of stuff about. I feel like I don't have time now. But yeah, a lot of the things I guess I just wanted to talk about were, like how everything is just interconnected. The role theory I realize really bridges things together, and we talk a lot about that in class. Yeah, I think I'm out of time. But thank you so much. That was a great interview, so I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Mr. Moreno.
Okay, hi Marino. So for this part, I will be asking you a question. And I feel like it's a question within a question within a question. Not necessarily, but these questions that I have are surrounded, they're about this idea of spontaneity that you have, and an emotional resolution. And this question is actually something that I had early on, because it was one of the first things that we learned in psychodrama, about the husband and wife that you worked with. There were a lot of problems, I think, with the whole intervention, the experiment that you had with that couple, and even though that they had less marital problems and it worked out, I still think there were some hope, like there was just some questionable things. And so in the notes book that we were given, chapters 2 and chapters 11, you talk about the techniques of spontaneity drama and how it helps with emotional problems. Like it gives spontaneity is like the cure, I guess, for resolution of emotional problems. And you say, as long, however, as he is unable to summon the spontaneity necessary to meet the change, a disequilibrium will manifest itself, which will find its greatest expression in his interpersonal and interrole relationships. And so my question to you is, why necessarily do you think that is the case when it comes to psychodrama? I think an emotional catharsis or resolution can happen without it, and I don't think that it's a necessity. So my question is, why do you think that is a necessity for every single time someone is in a psychodrama, this spontaneous interaction? Why do I feel like the spontaneity and creativity has to be a requirement? Well, as you know, the marital problems with the husband and the wife did work out, and I actually became a pillar for family therapy, marriage therapy, and for audience therapy. The emotional catharsis aspect doesn't happen with just the spontaneity, but it also happens with the sharing, and that can only happen because of the spontaneity and the creativity. It's an emotional risk that you have to put yourself, you should do in a psychodrama in order to be able to actually learn new behaviors and new perspectives. So yes, I do think that a psychodrama, you should have spontaneity. It should be a part of life, and that is one of the reasons why society fails at healing our communities, because we're not putting a lot of emphasis and attention on spontaneity. So yes, it is a requirement. Right. I disagree, but I think spontaneity can be powerful, but I think that it becomes a little bit pushy. I think the way you go about it is just so pushy. And I don't want to be a facilitator that's pushy with spontaneity. you don't want to be a facilitator that's pushy. You don't want to be a facilitator that's pushy. Well, sometimes your clients are going to need that push. In order to achieve an emotional catharsis, an emotional resolution, you have to undergo some type of emotional risk. That's the only way that the healing and creative process can work for your clients. And you, as the therapist, are supposed to guide them. So it's not being pushy, it's being vulnerable, and that's the whole point of a psychodrama. In order for you to dig deeper and to have an insightful experience. And that can only happen if you take that risk. So if that means that you have to be spontaneous and try something new, regardless of how uncomfortable you feel, then that's what you need to do. That's the next step that you need to take. But in that circle's reality, you're able to do that. And I think you're right. But I think two different eras. When I mean by pushy, I just think, it takes time for everyone to want to take those types of emotional risks. Pacing is important, consent is important. I don't think not once you ask the wife, Barbara, I don't think you asked Barbara not once or asked for consent or, it was just, that's just not cool. And even though the spontaneity, they did something different, I think you can achieve an emotional catharsis or you can achieve healing and still take those risks and just do it in a different way and you can still have a healing experience. I think safety is really important, and I don't think when you push your clients into this, you have to be spontaneous, you have to always be thinking creatively and force that imagination. I think sometimes that can kind of turn people away, and I think sometimes that can cause someone to internalize it and just not, and actually, what's the word? Just not actually full throttle actually be present in the here and now. There's a lot of pressure, I think, with that. I agree, but I also think, even though the surface reality, there's no limit to it, I think what you're saying can almost be kind of limiting in a sense, I think it doesn't have to be a necessity. I think it should be encouraged, but I don't think it should be forced or wrung out of the client. If it's not there, it shouldn't be pushed. It shouldn't be, and I think as a therapist, you should help your client take that risk, but also help them find other ways to get that emotional resolution. And it doesn't always have to be through spontaneity. Yeah, that's what I think. Thank you for your response. Yeah, a lot of things about trust and safety. I think there's a fine line, Well, psychodrama is about taking risks, not necessarily about safety. Sure, but psychological safety, I think, is definitely important, and that's another conversation about ethics. Yeah, but thank you for that question. I will definitely be doing more research on what you said about spontaneity in relation to emotional catharsis. Okay. Hi, Moreno. So lastly, for this next part, I will just be sharing with you an idea I had for a drama therapy intervention, if I were facilitating one. So I actually thought about expanding on something that actually happened for me in one of my classes. In one of my group dynamics classes, we were in a debate where we were debating if everyone should be if everyone in their life at least wanted to take that risk to go skydiving, or they shouldn't. And there was one moderator. And there was a lot of discourse happening, a lot of things were being said, were taken into consideration, but then they were being, argued against. There was a lot going on. And so I was thinking a really great psychodramatic technique to further that whole intervention would be future projection. And I've been thinking a lot about, I wouldn't say like a lot, it's probably the least psychodramatic technique I've thought about, but because we recently worked on it in our class, I thought about how cool that would be. And I was thinking, in that atmosphere, what was going on, I wonder how cool it would be to include future projection where everybody on either side would like project, okay, well, what can you imagine a world like 5 years in the future where everyone had to go skydiving or skydiving was illegal? How would that look like? How would you feel for yourself? So I wanted to know what you thought about using future projection in that atmosphere, in that place space. Well, absolutely. I think future projection is a great way to get deeper and to imagine other possibilities. I think that's a great way for the clients that you were facilitating, for everyone to think about different possibilities, think about different types of futures for themselves in this whole surplus reality of taking risks, because they're taking a risk. And it's very interesting that on either side, you have one side who's taking that risk and the other side who isn't. Both very different extremes. So future projection allows you to play with those different extremes. And from there, you can probably actually get into different psychodramas for each individual, why they feel that taking this risk is really important to them. And maybe it can further bring other things to the surface. How they feel about taking risks. You should ask some more questions. What does this say about you as a person? How would you feel in the future 5 years later if skydiving was illegal? How would this have an impact on your life and other things, other questions like that? So I absolutely think future projection is a great technique, but I also want to push a little farther with that maybe with future projection you should include other ones. Future projection could move you further into empty chair work, or role reversal would be a really great one, where you can really concretize what people are feeling. Empty chair, you could really dig deep into maybe some of these feelings that people are having. Could be symbolizing past traumas or early childhood. You can bring these to the surface with the future projection. So I think that's a great idea. Please tell me a little bit more about the future projection. Well, yes. Thank you. I think the future projection is a technique that I haven't really seen used a lot. In our classes, we've used a lot of the role reversal, and you're right, like the role reversal is so foundational and so it's just like one of the most effective and impactful psychodramatic techniques. So I was thinking that actually, and I was thinking empty chair, but I think future projection, I think people don't do that often. I know what I think people don't concretize what it really means to them. Like if you imagine something in the future, what does it say about your fears? What does it say about your desires? What does it say about something that happened to you in the past and why you're thinking this way? Why are you projecting that? Whatever future projection you have, I think it says a lot about you in the here and now, like in the moment. And I think that would just be a cool way to keep that distance, and you don't use metaphor, but to play with the metaphor of skydiving as that risk and just seeing what that can bring up for some people. So yeah, I would use future projection in that.